Put your hands on top of your head.
Well, I didn't.
Now! Yeah. Uh-huh. Now the jam. Get down, get down. Here comes the jam. Getting down with the truth. The only way he knows how to. Girls all up with his name. We're calling the chief. You're damn right. He's gonna get that sucker. Yo, we track down the truth. You know what a track down the truth. You know it. What do they call him? We call him the chief. You're damn right we do. Oh.
I'll bet your mother had a loud bark.
Good morning. This is Morning Coffee with the Chief. I'm your host, Patrick Jordan, here on Pop Culture Minefield. You can find us every 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time on Pop Culture Minefield's YouTube channel, their Rumble page, and their Facebook page. You know, I have a great show for you today. We're going to talk about, and just because of all the fires in California, I want to do a fire-related movie. So normally we deconstruct and review cop-related movies and crime movies, but I decided that I want to do something about firefighters. And I remembered a movie from a few years back that I had watched, and it is called Only the Brave, right? And I decided, well, let me do that one. It's a true story about some hot shots that died in the line of duty while they were fighting a fire in Arizona. But before I get into that, I got to do my normal plug for the Los Angeles mission. As you know, I sit on the board of the LA mission, and things are getting a little tough. People are unhappy with the homeless industrial the homeless industrial complex, and unfortunately, nonprofits like the Los Angeles mission, which is faith-based, take a hit on donations because people just get mad at everything, right? So the donations are down at the Los Angeles mission. And I just want to talk a little bit about what they actually do that's a little different than what government does. Government does what they call housing first, where they put them in and then give them services. In reality, what needs to happen is we need to meet the needs of the individual as they're identified. We don't just do a blanket policy. We find out what their issue is. We give them a bed and basic services, but get them into treatment. You know, for some of it's alcohol, some of it's drugs, some of it's a combination of both, and some of them it's, co-occurring conditions, including mental health issues. And so each one has a different story, and each one has a different path to recovery. And the LA mission tries to find that right path for each one. And it also has a faith-based component to it, which is one of the reasons why it doesn't really get money from government, right? They use cognitive behavioral therapy programs, which is the gold standard. If you're going to try and change people's thinking and get them off the street, it's what needs to be used. This is where it differs from government, and this is where it has its successes. And so I'm encouraging you to look at the Los Angeles Mission, losangelesmission.org, and make a donation today for them. Now, before we get into our show, before I interview guests, one of the guests I'm going to have on is the father of one of the firefighters that is killed in the movie. The movie is the depiction of a true story of some hot shots who died in the line of duty, but he has a charity. And I just want to, as we go through this film, I want the charity to kind of flow underneath the screen so you can see it. And his charity is Explorers for Life. And let's throw the page up there. We're going to have Joe explain it here in a minute. And then there we go. You can see it strolling under the screen, and I want you to check it out. As Kevin Wojciech, he's one of the firefighters who died. Explorers for Life Association, and we have the web page down there. Here's the web page, and it talks about what it's all about. It helps support people who want to become firefighters and maybe don't have the resources to do that. But we'll let Joe explain it here in a minute. But it's going to be scrolling on the screen as we do our show. And do me a favor, take a look at it. I know there's a lot of requests for donations. Now, I did a show last week on my other show, Briefing with the Chief, where I talked about some of the policy failures that might have led to the fire. We won't get into those today, but I want to encourage you to look at Briefing with the Chief for last week's show. Basically, we talk about what happens with a fire. I was on hotspot and without power, and yet I got a lot of comments that people understood what the hell I was talking about, because it was a little more complicated policy issues that I think contributed to the failures. And on tomorrow's show, for Briefing with the Chief. Now, this one's on KJRDB.com, KJR Radio, but I also broadcast it on Rumble. I will address in the first part of my show, I'll clarify what I said last week about our lack of investment in brush clearance and our lack of investment in making electrical lines more resilient. Why I think those are that was a theory of mine last week, but I think I found the evidence to prove that that is likely true. Anyway, so the movie, let me get into the movie here. The movie was Only the Brave. It was released in 2017, and it depicts the true story of the Granite Mountain Hotshots who were fighting a fire in Arizona and were overtaken by fire and passed away. It was the largest loss of life of firefighters in one event since 9/11. It's very tragic. And we have two guests today. I guess I'll start with my old friend. He was actually living in Prescott, Arizona when this happened, and he's familiar with it, and he's familiar with some of the family members of one of the guys who was killed, and that is Lieutenant John Baylis. We've had him on before.
Morning.
Hey, Johnny B, how you doing?
Good.
Good. And let's bring on right away without any ado the Joe Wojcik. He's a retired LA County firefighter captain, and you can tell he's using his cell phone there. We appreciate Joe joining the show, and really devastating fires right now going on, Joe, in LA County, or at least recently in LA County. I know I had some conversation with you, and some of your friends said these were some of the most dangerous fires they had seen, right, in their careers.
Yeah. Hey, thanks for having me on the show, and I'm very humbled to be here. But yes, to answer your question, I was out for 3 days at the Palisades fire, and in my 37-year career, I've never seen that type of destruction. There was no wood left. There was no. If it wasn't concrete and it wasn't steel, it wasn't left. But incredible devastation, and not an isolated incident. It was just overwhelming, as large as it was.
Yeah, it's I'm not that far. I was actually sandwiched between two of these fires and getting ready to evacuate, but fortunately, the firefighters slowed it down, so I didn't have to evacuate. But hey, today we're talking about Granite Mountain Hotshots. Your son was one of the Granite Mountain Hotshots that was overcome by flames. Can you talk a little bit? I wanted to get a little bit into some of the. Well, let's talk about the charity first. So let's talk about Explorers for Life. After your son Kevin passed away, you started this charity. Explain what the charity is all about.
Sure. So June 30th, 2013, we lost the crew, and the fire family and the community put their arms around our family. My wife and I were talking one day, not long after the incident, and she was just overwhelmed with emotion and wanted to know how we could give back. And it was her idea. She said, "I want to start a charity. I want to start something that gives back." And Kevin loved being a fire explorer. My son Bobby was also a fire explorer. So I have some background in the nonprofit world, so we discussed it, and we started the Kevin Wojcik Explorers for Life Association, supporting young men and women in their pursuit of becoming a first responder. And we typically target underserved individuals. I like to say that maybe that young man or young woman standing on top of that block wall, and they're gonna jump off on the good side or the bad side, and we try to push them off on the good side, and want to take money out of their issues. To date, we've donated almost $900,000 in scholarships and gear to young men and women across the United States, and we have set up a earmarking funding for donations right now to support young men and women in that were affected by the fires in Altadena and Palisades. So we've done really well. We have great support. We have, we're all volunteer. Nobody gets paid. There's no stipends. There's no every dime goes back into the organization. I'm sitting right now at my desk in Kevin's bedroom in our house. So we don't have an office. It's Kevin's bedroom's our office, and we are bare bones, but we get to give back a lot of the love that was given to our family.
Well, I do
God bless
appreciate
you.
you responding in a positive way to a tragedy. And, before we get in the movie, let's talk about Kevin's path to being a firefighter. How did, obviously he grew up with a firefighter, so dad is his hero and he follows you into the business. How did he end up in Arizona? What's that pathway, Joe?
So Kevin was a very laser focused from a very young age. I work with the Los Angeles County Fire Museum, and I've been there for over 25 years. And all my kids grew up going to the fire museum, working on old fire engines, and hanging out with dad while I was working on Squad 51 or Engine 51 from the TV show Emergency, or working with our crews. And so they grew up in the fire service, coming to the fire station. Kevin was the 9th firefighter in our family, and he wanted to be a firefighter. That was his goal. And growing up, he was a cross country runner. He was a junior lifeguard from day one. He got his EMT right out of high school and worked on an ambulance company, and then decided he wanted to be on a hand crew, and ended up on a Type 2 hand crew in South Dakota. Got hired over the telephone, had to pass a urine test, and then got in his car and drove away. Ended up in South Dakota for a season, and learned some of the basics. Joined the Johnson Siding Volunteer Fire Department. Took his EMT skills from working here, and while he was working on a hand crew in South Dakota, he was also on that volunteer fire department. Came back from South Dakota and went to the El Camino Fire Academy, Structured Fire Academy, with the goal of finishing and then starting paramedic school. The goal was for him to become a firefighter and earn his way, not ride his dad's coattail in. We didn't want him go into the fire service and say, "Hey, you're Joe Wojak's son. No wonder you got hired." I wanted him to have the tools necessary to go in and be his own person and have his own career. He was good at listening, and he definitely was working on an incredible resume for such a young guy at 21 years old. When he got back from South Dakota, when he got done with his fire academy, it was time to start testing, but he told me he wanted to do one more season on a hand crew. He wanted to be a hot shot. So LA County has got a very large urban interface, and my thinking was I spent 4 years on a hand crew, and it helped me as a captain. I'm figuring, might not hurt him as a 21-year-old to go do a year on a hot shot crew to get some more experience before he ends up on a structure engine somewhere. So we helped him. I helped him. We did some homework and ended up at Granite Mountain. And the rest, I guess you would say, is history. He did well there. He was very new there. They started in early April, and they were killed in June. So he only had a couple months there, but that's how he got there. He was following my footsteps, but he was earning his own way.
Well, we're certainly proud of his sacrifice, and proud. It's good to hear that story, because people nowadays want to have stuff handed to them, and that's not your son. So hey, let's talk a little bit about the Yarnell fire. We won't get into that. I just want to tell people that the culminax of this movie is the Yarnell Hill fire in June 2013. That is when these young men passed away. But let's roll the first scene, and as we'll get into some of the definitions, Joe, because we tend to try and talk about the technical aspect of what we're seeing as well, because most people don't know that. But the first scene, Granite Mountain Hot Shots, and this is it. You can see Josh Brolin, and we always talk a little bit about the actors. I love this guy. I've done several movies with him. I think he was in Sicario, both the movies I did on Sicario. He was in Gangster Squad. I did that movie, and we've done several. I think John was with me on some of those movies. Love this guy, great actor. Also, I don't see that he has a lot of negative political opinions, so he's easier to like, just because he's a good guy. Yeah, what do you think? Josh Brolin does a pretty good job in this film, John. What do you think?
Oh, he's a hell of an actor. I can't stand him politically, but hell of an actor. Hell of an actor. No, he's really good. He knows. And there's times in here where it's very personal between him and his wife, and and he had a drug thing back in his past, and he's trying to look out for Miles Telfer, the one actor that played the guy that lived. Just wonderfully done, and it was a well-written show. Movie, and I know all the areas out there because I lived out there for 7 years, and I really thought it was a great movie.
Yeah, there's good. I mean, we got Jeff Bridges in this. His is more of a cameo supporting role. We got Miles Teller, as you talked about, James Badge Dale, Taylor Kitsch, and Jennifer Connelly. These really good folks. And Joe, now my understanding is you got a chance to interact with many of the actors, and they were very good with you and the families, right? You want to talk a little bit about Josh Brolin and the actors on set?
Sure. Yeah, we got to hang out with. Well, back up a little bit. They flew our families. Many of the families that wanted to go to Albuquerque, New Mexico, to go on set while they were filming. So it was an interesting trip. My wife, my daughter, and I went, and basically we were gone for 24 hours. Flew into Albuquerque, New Mexico, and got to go hang out. And I'll tell you what, it was interesting to be on set. On the firefighter side, I'm a fire safety officer in the movie industry before I retired. So I've been on set before. So I'm not an expert by any means, but I'm not uncomfortable being on set. Kind of know the general lay of the land. But it was interesting to go on set and see, the trailers with your family member's name on it. They went by character wherever they were on the set. So it was interesting to go by and see a trailer with my son's name on it. But as far as the directors, the producers, Miles Teller was absolutely amazing with our family and spent, as much time as we needed. Jeff Bridges, all of them, Josh Brolin. We didn't get to spend much time with Josh Brolin, but at that point, but we did spend time with him later. It was interesting. We had lunch at the tent. And it was interesting because I could look around and see the actors, and I could tell you who they were playing in the movie, and I'd never met them before. I could tell you who Robert Caldwell, who the actor was playing Robert. I could tell who the actor was that was playing my son, a guy named Michael McNulty, great kid. But they definitely took time with us. There was no rush. They weren't looking over our shoulders trying to look for a bigger name. They were definitely in with us. They put my wife in the director's chair, and they were very, very respectful, and I have nothing but positive comments to say about that. But I must back up a little bit about this whole movie and our family dynamics. My wife and I had very different opinions on whether we were going to support this movie, and it was my wife saying, I don't want anybody to make money off of the death of our son.
Understandable.
And no, I respected that opinion. But my thought was, they're going to make this movie either way, with us or without us.
Yeah.
And if we don't give them the correct information, they can make anything up they want. So we came to an agreement that we would provide them with information about Kevin. The actor who played Kevin actually wore Kevin's shirts in the movie.
Wow.
His fire museum shirts, his fire department shirts, and our fire chief gave us permission for that to happen. So I got to talk to that young man, Michael McNulty, for I don't even know, hours and hours and hours about prior to the movie, about Kevin and his mannerisms and who he was, and you know, he was not a principal in the movie. He was just one of the guys, but they got it right. They got the detail right. The actual, I mean, Michael McNulty wore the exact same sunglasses my son wore. He wore the exact same watch that I had given Kevin on his 18th birthday. They got the details right. The truck in the parking lot. I mean, all the way down. I mean, there was some stuff that I'm sure was missed, but I'm
Sure.
from the backside, knowing the story intimately, it was like, man, they got that one right. They were very, very detail oriented when they were getting ready to start this movie. But going on set was great. It was also interesting the day that we found out they were going to do the movie. We were doing a charity event on a fishing boat with for my son's nonprofit, and we had about 50 firefighters and their families on a fishing boat out in the middle of out in the Pacific Ocean. And Brendan McDonough, the lone survivor on the crew, was with us, and there were 5 of us Granite Mountain dads on that boat. And there was a producer, Michael Menschel, was on the boat. Brendan said, "Hey, I want to bring this guy. I want to introduce him to you." And he had not told it. We had heard rumblings that they were going to do a movie, so we were kind of thinking, man, maybe. But anyway, so we're on the boat. We're out at sea, and later in the afternoon, Brendan drags the 5 of us together with Michael Menschel upstairs on this fishing boat. And Michael, you know, he was very well spoken and very, very respectful. And he told us that, hey, here's a story. I'm going to do a movie. I'm going to do a movie about your boys. And I'm going to tell you, it was not met with handshakes and hugs. That's for sure. It was. I think I said something like, "You don't screw this up." You know, I think might have been a little more aggressive than that, but don't screw this up. So I can't tell you, when we did see the movie for the first time, he was waiting for us outside the studio, and he asked me what I thought, and I gave him a thumbs up, and he goes, "I want you to know that I thought about that every day when we were on set." So yeah. I guess that's a long answer to your short question.
No. Here's what I saw in the movie. I saw the technical. I mean, I'm not a firefighter, but I've seen a lot of firefighters get fought. The technical aspects seem to be very clear. You know, there's a little bit of drama between hand crews and hot shots and their structure versus wildland. That's all natural stuff, but they got it right in the right tone. You know, it wasn't overdone. It wasn't over dramatized, and I just think that they told the story. They didn't embellish the story. That's what I got out of the movie. And all the way through, you know, successfully completing the school for hot shots, even the difference between a municipal hotshot crew, which was the only one in the country, versus federal teams. And so they talked about a lot of really technical stuff that most people don't know about, and they appear to have gotten it right. And we'll get into some of that in a little bit. But also, you know, they showed these guys as just normal guys doing a tough job. And I have to say, you know, doing hand crews and doing wildland fire looks way more taxing than a lot of the other stuff you guys do. And I don't mean to offend anybody, but that's just the way it looks like to me. And you guys are making a living when you're out there clearing brush and doing a fire line and all that other stuff. But I think they got it right, and I think they just hit the right tone. I could be wrong, but let's roll the next scene, and I'll ask you the difference between a Type 2 hand crew and a hot shot and a smoke jumper and a structure firefighter, because I think people need to understand that. So here's this scene is it's Type 2. We have Josh Brolin here. He's looking at a fire. He's been around for a while. He kind of knows how the fire is going to react, and he says this to the lead of a hot shot crew, and the hot shot crew kind of dismisses them. Now that kind of stuff happens in the police service as well, and he's smarting because of that. But let's talk about difference between a Type 2 crew, Joe, and a hot shot crew, and maybe throw in the smoke jumpers in there if you had that knowledge.
Right. Yeah, I've been out of the game for a while, but basically it's hotshot crews have more training and are initial attack right on the fire line type firefighters, where typically Type 2 crews are not initial attack. They are the follow-up, come in and put out spot fires and smokes and clean up the line. So the hotshots basically come in and put in a scratch line, try to get attack it as fast as they can, try to keep it as small as they can, and then the Type 2 crew comes in behind them and cleans up. That's, as simple as it gets, that's for sure. So,
and there's different levels of training for these folks, because that appears to be what is presented in the movies.
Right? Yeah. So your hotshots have more training and are have graduated to a position that they can do initial attack, where the Type 2 crews are not always are not trained, don't have the training that a hotshot crew does. Now that being said, sometimes Type 2 crews can do initial attack. It's kind of a really, we could spend all day talking about the different levels of firefighters, but pretty basic, the hotshots. And all of them are underpaid. They work so hard, they're underpaid. Yeah. I know that I think the average salary of a hotshot firefighter is less than working at McDonald's in California.
Ooh.
Yeah, that's that, and it's seasonal too. That's the other part of it, right? You want to talk a little bit about the seasonal aspect of hotshot and hand crews?
Right. So basically, they come in predetermined sign-in day and then sign-out day, and they are unemployed for the winter. Pretty straightforward. They are not permanent employees. They don't have retirement systems. They are unless they can get a year-round gig. They know they're going to be unemployed in the winter time. That being said, we're in late January, and we start having fires in Southern California with our late Santa Ana wind event. So they can extend them as needed.
Yeah, but they fly. They're typed as a resource, and they can fly across the country, because you see a little bit of that depending on what they are. Johnny B, so you lived in Arizona for 7 years. Population is growing in Arizona. Risk for fires is growing in Arizona. So the need for a team like this is appropriate. You were living in Arizona. How far were you from Yarnell? You were in Prescott. So
Prescott's about 30 miles from Yarnell, which was totally destroyed during that fire. And I was a member of the Prescott Noon Lions Club, and a lot of retired deputies and Long Beach cops. Buzz Williams, who's been on the show with us a few times. Mm-hmm. What we did after that fire is we went out to Yarnell. Their fire department was completely wiped out. We bought them 2 ATVs so they can get out there and do some of the stuff out in the fields. We also took all the kids from any parents that we could find in Yarnell, and some of the kids that were members of the Hot Shots that passed away, the Granite Mountain Hot Shots. And we took them all to the movies a couple times just to kind of give them some relief and some stress relief and help them out as much as we could. And we did a bunch of charity stuff for their for food and everything else over there, because they were completely wiped out.
Yeah. Okay. So, but were you, as from the time you were there, they had a lot of these brush fires, right? So it was critical to
Yeah, it
maintain.
wasn't too bad until the winds were always. Yeah, let me put it this way: when I first moved to Prescott, I'm thinking this is like Palmdale, man.
Right.
Them winds never stop. But if you look in the movie, and I don't know how realistic it is, it seemed pretty realistic to me when Miles Teller was the lookout, and he's looking out at that ridge. Next thing you know, he's overrun. That fire that quick, it makes its own wind. Isn't that right, Joe? Fire makes its own wind sometimes.
Yes, sir.
It spread so quickly. It's just, and over there is just horrendous. It was 30 miles from Prescott.
Yeah, well, let's talk a little bit. Let's roll the next scene, and we're going to talk a little bit about budgets and funding, because obviously, as a chief, that's something I'm familiar with. And this is really Jeff Bridges is talking about this. So here we got Josh Brolin. He wants to take the next step. He wants to turn his Type 2 crew into hot shots. He wants to be the first municipal hotshot crew in the country. And Jeff Bridges is, has a relationship. Then probably ran that crew before and has some influence in city government. And he's trying.
I think he was the fire chief, wasn't he?
Was he
Or
the fire
retired
chief
fire
overall?
chief?
Maybe he was. But he was trying to get it done for him. And we got to talk a little bit about Jeff Bridges. I love Jeff Bridges as an actor. I mean, Thunderbolt and Lightfoot. I remember way back one of his earlier films with Clint Eastwood. Fantastic actor, and just a good actor across the board. I mean, even when he did the remake of Rooster Cogburn, great actor. John B., what do you think of Jeff Bridges as an actor?
Oh, he's great. He's phenomenal. His voice has changed over the years because of different accents and stuff. But I'll tell you, he's a hell. And when he does singing in this movie, he really actually sings. He has his own little country band. And what I really liked about the movie is they used Prescott. Matt's Saloon. That's right there on Whiskey Row, and Murph Saloon, and everything, all that real stuff right there on Whiskey Row. Loved it.
Well, do they hit the kind of local vibe with the cowboy hats and the way they talk and all that stuff? I mean, I remember
in Matt's Saloon, Matt's Saloon,
I think I saw you after you moved to Prescott. You had a big belt buckle, John, big Western belt buckle there for a while. Several, yeah, because you got into the local thing as well, right?
Oh yeah, got to have my cowboy boots and all that stuff. But no, it was nice. Matt's Saloon is a great place. There's also a couple rock bars that are right there at the Palace next door and everything else. So you get a little bit of everything there. But Matt's Saloon was always packed.
One of the things is, John, as you know, and so Prescott was growing, right? In fact, Arizona's population is growing. And so when you grow, there's always this drama over budget. Can we pay it? Do we need it? Can we pay for it? And of course, as we all know, I guess they're talking a little bit about this fire, budget cuts and things getting cut out. And it seemed to me, and I don't know if that, like, Brolin's team was always kind of on the chopping block, always at risk of being cut. And he's fighting for it to expand, which is really hard to do, right? But it was needed.
It's difficult. I'll tell you, I met the mayor when I was there, because with the Lions Club, each year we have to do we do a big pancake breakfast and all that, and we make a lot of money doing that for charity. But I sat down with the mayor when I first got up there, and it kind of blew him away. He asked my background. I told him LA sheriff, and I worked for the sheriff. We had a $2.1 billion budget. He goes, "Excuse me?" I says, "Yeah, our budget was $2.1 billion at the time." He goes, "Billion?" Yeah, that was more than the entire Prescott and Yavapai County budget.
Yeah.
And he was amazed at that. So when it shows him trying to, he's trying to keep that going, but he doesn't know if the taxpayers really want it, because they haven't really been certified yet. And it's all about budget. That it's all about money. And if they didn't, but they kept it, thank God.
Joe, Joe, you don't need it till you need it, right? And that's just a reality of specialized policing and firefighting, right? You don't need it until you need it, right? So that's a struggle with the fire service as well. I won't go too deeply, but we're looking at that now with the fires in LA. But that's what's going on in the scene in the movie, right? They're struggling to maintain a resource that fire realizes that they need, but people don't realize they need it till they need it, right? That happens with budgets. What do you think, Joe?
Yeah, I wasn't that tight with in Prescott, Arizona, so I don't know the politics of the funding and where money needed to go. So obviously, I'm pro fire department, and I also come from a budget of not the 2 billion mark, but ours, I think, for LA County Fire is like 1.4 billion.
Yeah.
So it for me, it's if you need 100 fire engines, you ask for 100 fire engines, and
Yep.
you get them. So for them to do what they do with what they have, I'm sure it's always a struggle. I don't know how they do it, to tell you the truth. It is a slippery slope, and I'm not up on their budgets and their politics. I really don't have much to say about that, other than when you need it, you need it. You're absolutely right.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. They had trouble funding the jail there for Prescott PD at the same time. And, they're trying to get money, rob Paul to pay Peter. And they had to shut it down for a little while and move all the bodies out to Yavapai, to the sheriff's jail. But same with the fire department. It's like, you're scratching for that little tidbit to keep you guys going. It's tough, real tough, especially in a small municipality like that. And the people don't understand. They don't understand what's going on. Even though you tell them, it's all about tax money and what they're doing with it.
Well, I just want to remind the folks that are coming on board, some of our followers, that we do have one of the fathers of the firefighters who fought at our Yarnell fire and passed away in the Yarnell fire. And if you see what's scrolling on the screen underneath, it is explorersforlife.org. That is a charity ran by Joe Wycheck, the father of Kevin Wycheck. And just take a look at that page and make a donation. They're also collecting money for some of the victims out here in California in the latest fires. So that's who we got on the show today, and I'm excited to have both of our guests on today. So yeah, you don't need it till you need it. That's the way it is. It's funny. When I at my level at chief, I mean, my last gig, Joe, I had 1,200 people, and you're right. In California, we're resource rich generally, but sometimes you need that specialty crew. Sometimes you need something that was on the chopping block and you regret that you cut it. But those are the kind of things that happen. And certainly some of the politicians locally are regretting some of their decisions. But here's one. I do want to say something about that. When you make a tough decision on a budget and it comes back to haunt you, stand up and take the hits. Don't direct.
Yeah, absolutely.
Stand up and just take the hits. I made the decision. It was tough. I wanted to fund this over this. I apologize. We're going to correct this and move forward. And don't try to deflect. I think that represents leadership more than anything else. With somebody who's making these budget crunches. But in this case, our mayor, he kept it. He kept it in. And not only did he keep it, he ultimately supported their goal of becoming a hotshot team. So let's roll. When is the last time you used? Because this is one of the themes seem to be in this show. And Joe, I'll have to ask you, is that some of these guys had a little desperate lifestyle and they're turning their life around. At least that it appears to be with this one actor that they profile in this film, that he was using heroin and doing other stuff, and he's a young man and he's turned his life around. They kind of infer Josh Brolin had addiction issues and he turned his life around. His wife had addiction issues, he turned her life around. Now, for me, I oversaw the fire crew that the LA County Sheriff's Department supplied through its jail system. So for me, it's like, okay, I can identify with this. I don't necessarily agree with, hey, because they worked, a hand crew line while they were in jail, they should be a firefighter, because there's so many other things to reduce personal challenges than just hard work and getting fit, right? But that, I don't know if this is a case with some of the hand crews. I don't know if Kevin experienced that some of these guys are turning life around, and this is their pathway to turn life around. Was that kind of accurate with some of our characters in the movie, in your opinion?
Well, Kevin was, I'm going to say, kind of a milk and cookies kid. But so, no, Kevin did not have any addiction problems, and just just a good kid, but not a perfect kid by any means, but a good kid.
Nobody is.
But you're talking about Brendan McDonough, and that's who
Yeah.
Miles Teller played. Now, Brendan and I became very close. And I have to also preface this is I don't speak for any of the families. I'm
Right.
speaking for the
Got it.
Wojak family, and I won't, I won't talk on their behalfs. But I am tight enough with Brendan that I can share with you that he was a troubled young man. I think they probably got it really, really pretty right on his younger years. I can also tell you that Brendan McDonough and I became great friends right after the event. He was just barely older than Kevin, and I don't know if I became a father figure for him and him a son figure for me, but we clicked, and his family comes and stays with us. He got married. He has a little boy now. He has absolutely turned his life around. He is
Good
sober.
for him.
He is a good man and has a good family. He last December 19th, I had the honor of going to Prescott, Arizona, and pinning his badge on his chest. He is now a Prescott firefighter,
Wonderful.
structure firefighter.
Cool.
So he started his own company. Very driven, very sharp young man, very respectful, and very sober. So I have nothing but love for that man and his family, as does my family. He got me through some tough times, and I'm sure I got him through some tough times. He has a book out called, it's one of two names. It's either called Granite Mountain or My Lost Brothers. And it tells the story of him growing up. And
I think it's My Lost Brothers. I think I saw that. Yeah. Okay.
It's actually under two names. So it's one or the other. It's also under the header of Granite Mountain. There was also another book called The Fire Line, written by Fernanda Santos, who was a bureau chief for the New York Times, and she came and spent some time with our family just to figure out who we were. And that book also talks about the Granite Mountain hotshots. But Brendan's book, My Lost Brothers, definitely captures his story and his addiction and his getting to where he was. Again, we are very tight.
Well, let's talk a little bit about recovery. So what you're talking about is recovery, right? And I one of the things that it came through in the movie, and now he's a dad. We I think we discount the importance of fathers to some degree in our society these days. That's just me making a political statement. But you know what? What was ingrained in this young man really was, I'm a dad. I have to stop this foolishness. I have to turn this around. That's what I saw in the movie, and that's what I hear being explained by you, Joe, is when he faced the realities of what had to happen, he made the right decisions, and it wasn't an easy decision, as we're going to get in the middle in a minute here. But he made the right decision, and I think that's what being a father and a man is all about. I think I'll let you both comment on that one, Joe. You agree?
Yeah, he definitely is a stand-up guy, and that's it. The movie picked it out perfect. But once he decided he was going to be a dad, he was a dad, and that is in his character. That's how he is. So,
John,
No,
all
that's
that toxic
wonderful.
masculinity, being a dad, right? All that stuff that
absolutely.
now you've figured out. That's what it's all about, right?
Yeah, in America, everybody likes second chances and people that pull themselves up by their bootstraps and get to it. And I thought they showed it very well. They didn't overly dramatize it and spend too much time on drugs and this and that, but they hit the essence of everything and the man and how he grew. And as Joe said, he's still growing, and now he's a Prescott fireman. God bless him. That's a wonderful thing. And I'll tell you, when I moved up to Prescott, I bought my house in 06 and moved there permanently in 2010. There was a dirty little secret up in Prescott is a lot of meth and a lot of rehab up there. And every time a business closed, somebody'd buy it up and they turn it into like a little rehab where you live in and everything else. But God bless that kid for getting his act together, and look what he's done. That's a testament to life, and God bless him. That's a wonderful thing.
Well, we want to thank the producer. He just put in the comments the Amazon page for Brendan's book. So thank you, Martine. Let's roll with the next scene, and this one is training. Okay, so these guys, this is what I was talking about. He says, well, he definitely earned it. He didn't pick an easy way. It's not like he went to McDonald's and started working at $20 an hour in California. He picked a very, I don't know what the job things were available in Prescott at the time, but this was no joke. Let's talk about the training these guys do. I know when I say I oversaw, I was a couple of ranks above the guys who actually took the guys out to get in shape, and they would do like 10-mile hikes just to get in shape for the fire crews from the LA County jail system. And then when I was watching this looked very much like that. All of it is about fitness because you have to hump up and down these hills and
with their packs.
With their packs and their equipment. So this is not an easy job. And so, Joe, when Brendan or your son or anybody else goes on a hand crew or becomes a hotshot, a big part of it is physical fitness, which is something they seem like they have to do every single day. You want to talk about the training aspect, the physical aspect of getting ready to be on a hand crew or a hotshot.
Oh, my goodness. They are elite athletes. I'm going to go with that. They are, when they're carrying their packs, they're going to hike into a fire. Before they start fighting fire, they might hike in 8 miles to get to the fire, and then they got to fight the fire. They are experts and comfortable at being uncomfortable. You got to remember that these wildland fires don't usually burn when it's 70 degrees. It's 112 degrees, 110 degrees. The wind's blowing 30 or 50. Everything wants to bite you. Everything wants to sting you. Everything wants to stab you while you're out there also. It is not a pleasant job, but as physical as you must be, you also have to have the mental capacity to put the pain behind you and to move on, to keep going. And that's where the teamwork comes in, because when you start struggling, your partners will, get you going. And it's when they train, they're always competing. They're always competing. When they were training in the off season or the early part of the season, they would race up a hill carrying each other piggyback style and race each other carrying another person against their other teammates. They would hike and they would run. And when they would run, my son was a cross country runner. He could fly. And the stories I got, that he always did well when they ran. He'd finish in the first couple. But when he hiked, they hiked better than he did, which was interesting. That he didn't hike as well as he could run. And what they would do is when he would run, they would and be out in front. They would just put more rocks in his backpack to slow him down. So,
damn.
Anyway, but when they hiked, they would take the rocks out of his backpack to keep him. That would be his handicapping. But these young men and women on hand crews and on hot shot crews, and I remember when I was on a crew, oh my goodness, I was in the best shape of my life. That is for sure. And you couldn't get enough calories, and you really took care of your feet. Number one was take care of your feet. And the teamwork, you build a bond with your crew, that's for sure. You go into harm's way, you're all uncomfortable together, and you get out, when you're done, you high five each other, and maybe you go have an adult beverage somewhere sometime and talk about the fire you were on. But it is no joke. I'm going to tell you right now. It is, when you see them come back, they're exhausted, and they can't get enough food and they can't get enough sleep.
Well, what I notice is, in addition to the camaraderie, and as they got along, and part of the training is pulling people together as a team, right? I mean, that's part of it, breaking people down and pulling them together as teams so they operate as a team. I mean, that's kind of universal when you're doing these small crew operations. Is that right, Joe? That's part of it.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, you're out there by yourselves. Your crew is out there, sometimes days by yourself. When you go into harm's way as a team, whether you like the guy standing next to you or not, you have a new respect for him, and you build a bond that maybe you don't hang out on your days off, but you trust him or her, and they trust you, and you get out of harm's way, and you have that bond that nobody else understands if you've never been there.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that. There were some times I didn't like guys I work with, but when I was in trouble, I wanted those guys coming.
Right.
Yeah.
Because they were really good. Because they
Yeah.
were there, and nothing got in their way if one of their brothers or sisters wearing the uniform needed help. Johnny B. So, fitness, hydration. These are all the things these guys need to think about. I mean, you got to have a hydration plan. Yeah, you have to. I mean, and they have to. This is something they have to do every single day, both practicing, but also when they get out there, because the remoteness of where they're fighting these fires, right?
Yeah, my back hurts just thinking about running with those backpacks. The hell, damn firemen. Let me tell you, there's a big, what people don't understand, there's a camaraderie between fire and police. We talk shit about them, they talk shit about us, but it's all because we love each other. And, they can't get into places because, we got to clear it first. But then when the fire hits, I ain't going in. I'd rather get shot at. Send the firemen in. I ain't getting burned.
Yeah.
There's a big difference there, but a lot of camaraderie. What used to bug the hell out of me, though, is they had in LA County and LA City physical training that had to be attributed every year. We didn't in the sheriff's department.
You
I don't know about LAPD.
I think so. Yeah.
When we got out of the academy, we were in outstanding shape. You feel great. And I kept working. I've been working out for 60 years as a bodybuilder. But, I can't tell you how many guys that have retired recently or still on the job that look like hell in a uniform because they quit working out after the academy. Whereas firemen are always doing something physical. Always. Granted, our SWAT teams, they'll do that. But the regular ground and pounders, after a few years, too many donuts, too many bagels, and too much drinking.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Too much half price of McDonald's is what.
Exactly.
I understand. Hey, I want to get into a little bit about, because we're coming up on our break here, but I wanted to talk a little bit about this because we're going to end up speeding through the last part of this. Is, Joe, when you're a hot shot or you're on hand crew, you are available to go anywhere in the country. Is that right? Can you talk about that process, how that works? And they do talk a little about it. When they do make hot shots, they get a little more money, and the city might get some federal money reimbursement from the feds. But talk about because this also has a dynamic with the families as well. So explain that.
Right. So the hotshot crews are available for what they call them a roll, 14-day deployments. So just like Granite Mountain, right before they came back to the Dulce fire, they were in New Mexico. And I know that because my son and I stayed in touch, and I was following him and he was following me on an app called Find My Friend. So I could look, and they'd be gone to New Mexico for 14 days. And then they would, turn around, head for home for a two day break. And, but they have the ability to go out of state. And I'm not real up on the exact. I would be speaking out of place if I tried to explain how they were funded and how the city made money with the crews. I don't know the politics of it. I mean, I have a general idea, but I wouldn't
That's
be
fine.
sharing
They're
accurately.
subject to a 14-day run. They could go anywhere in the country. They could also go out of the country, right? They do send people up to Canada and other things. I know we sent crews up there, but they're away from their family. So let's talk about if you're an active crew, you're away from your family a lot as well too, and which means mama or whatever, they got to take care of the fort while you're away, right?
Correct, and that's they're gone 14 days, but any firefighter, even on the structure side, with a family is going to be gone. And maybe not 14 days in a row, but you could be. I know that the Palisades fire I was just at, there are people there that have been there they're going to be there for 14 days, and they just got extended to 21 days. So in the fire service, it's not uncommon to be away from home. And I'm sure it's probably the same on the police side, that anytime anything bad happens at home, you're at work. But a 14-day role is good because there's overtime involved. You got to remember, they're seasonal employees, so they're working their regular hours, and then when they get deployed, they go on to some overtime hours, which helps offset the lack of funding that they get. It's you need to have a strong household, and it's tough on a family life. For us,
Sure.
and for Kevin, he was 21 years old, single young man, not married, nothing, no kids, and it probably that's the same way I did it when I was young. I was not married, and it would be very difficult to have a family and kids and be gone 14 days at a time. But people do it, all the time. It's not uncommon.
Yeah, that's part of the life. And, I get the sense from the movie, he was also having fun doing it. So, there's a fun dividend with the team there, and you can see that portrayed in the movie and just the camaraderie. But they also do talk about the disruption of family, mostly Josh Brolin. He's older, he's been around, he's got a partner he's been with for a long time, and it sounds like she wants to start a family and move forward, and she feels like she can't really do that because his addiction is the fire service, and that can be addicting. You love your job, and that's all about that. That happens with both police and fire. Some people make too much of a stake in their work and not at home, and they kind of portray that in the movie. So we see a little bit of that. Johnny, be right, that does happen.
Yeah,
guys,
and then I think he finally acquiesced and told James Badge Dale that, hey, this is my last season. You're taking over. Because he wants to be with his wife after that big blowout they had. But whether that's true or not, who knows? But it probably is. I didn't see a lot of embellishment and excessive drama put into this that they shouldn't, which Hollywood does on almost every movie, to make it look good. You didn't need to do it in this movie. And I wanted to say something before we go on break to Joe. I know you're proud of your son, and you should be, and you raised a great kid, because nowadays, how many kids are going to leave and go to freaking South Dakota to keep going to be a fireman and then come back and keep pushing and keep pushing? For a 21-year-old, God bless that kid. God bless him.
A dirty, sweaty job.
Family.
Dirty, sweaty job. Yeah,
that's an amazing story.
All right, we are at break time. It's time for us to take a little bit of a break. Just hold on. We'll be right back in 2 minutes. Just, Joe, this time you got to go to the bathroom, but just come back and pick up where we left off. See you guys in a little bit.
There's only one location on the internet where you can get it all: movie, TV, and comic industry. News and rumor analysis, official scoops from Geekosity magazine, reviews, and interviews. So, when you need it to be Sunday, there's only one place to go, mate. Pop Culture Minefield, where they're always talking nerd stuff. Right, jog on then. There's only one location on the internet where you can get it all. Movie, TV, and comic industry. News and rumor analysis. Official scoops from Geekosity magazine. Reviews and interviews. So, when you need it to be Sunday, there's only one place to go, mate. Pop Culture Minefield. Well, they're always talking nerd stuff. Right, jog on then.
Welcome back to Morning Coffee with the Chief. We are going over the movie Only the Brave. It depicts the 2013 incident, the Yarnell Hills fire, where the Granite Mountain hotshots were overcome by a fire, and 19 firefighters died. We're kind of doing this to honor the men and women of the fire services who are fighting the fires here in Los Angeles. And hopefully we'll get Joe back. Joe was here with us for the first hour. We hope to have him in the second hour. Anyways, his son passed away in that fire, and he has a charity. You can see, I think we're going to have it scrolling at the bottom here pretty soon. And it is Explorers for Life is his charity. It's explorersforlife.org. You can go to that charity. You can make a donation for the folks in California. You can also make a donation to the charity itself to help support that charity. And they help people who become explorers in the fire services, young people who want to become firefighters. Welcome back, Joe. Hey, listen, I wanted to let's throw the scene up there for briefing, because I wanted to get into a couple of technical things with you on this so that we understand what's going on here, because you see a couple things. So here's the briefing. So he's showing the map, and he's showing how they're going to do a fire. And a lot of people in California are now getting familiar with these fire maps, and they show where the fire's at, and they have an idea where the fire is going to go. And of course, they're giving people assignments. And you just saw there, it scrolled at the bottom, trigger points and fallback points and that kind of stuff. So I wanted to get a little bit into that. They do fly this crew out on a helicopter too, and you were seeing some updrafts from the fires. So let's talk a little bit. So when you're establishing a plan to fight a fire and you're putting your crews out there, they did talk a lot about, okay, here's your trigger point. Once this hits, you do that. Can you explain a little bit about how that works when you're dealing with a wildland fire? What are they talking about when they say trigger points, and how do they establish a trigger point?
Hang on one sec. Am I back?
Yeah, you're back.
Sweet. Sorry about that.
Did you hear the question I asked you about trigger points?
I did not. Sorry.
Okay. What I'm at, so in the briefing here, they're showing, and of course, they're getting evaluated on whether they're going to be a hotshot crew here, and we'll get a little bit into that as well. But in the briefing, they're saying, hey, you're going to go in this location, and here's your trigger point, and your fallback is this. When they're deploying resources and a strategy for fighting a fire and establishing trigger points, how do they establish that trigger point? And what goes into the thinking about how to fire trigger points, fallback positions, and that, because that becomes important in the fire a little bit in the show a little bit later.
Yeah. Without getting into the whole strategy and tactics of it, trigger points are basically a place where you figure if the fire gets to that point, then we need to pull back and head to a predetermined safety zone. It's basically it's just a place where with the expected fire behavior and expected weather, where you would still be safe. So if the fire is burning down a mile, and you figure if it gets to a half mile, we're going to back out until it settles down and make our stand there. But trigger points are just what they sound like. They're just places, predetermined places that are determined by people that are usually very well versed in the wildland firefighting community, and they have experience, and they know with the information they have, they're making the best decision they can for that crew.
And that's what goes into it. Obviously wind speed, terrain, all that other stuff probably factor into this. What kind of fuel is available? So I'm sure they use all of that to help make their decision.
Right.
And just the whole scene itself, because I know a lot of this is dramatization, but when you're out in the woods and you're just everybody's looking at the big fire map, right? And they're figuring it out and they're pointing out. So everybody's kind of on the same page. They understand and know the whole strategy, right? Everybody's included. And you kind of see that. Is that typically how they do because never been to one where you're out and I'm always at a command post where there's air conditioned, right? So that's how unfortunately that's how, when you're the incident commander, that's how you end up fighting fire. But here, when you're out in the middle of the forest, that's how it happens, right?
Right. They do morning briefings every morning on expected weather and expected fire behavior. So, that is done at least every 24 hours, and it can be updated at any time. But and that being said, I'm gonna just put out there that I have never studied this fire. I've read about it a little bit. I've never studied it. I've never spent a lot of time on the actual.
The one they're showing here is not the Yarnell fire. This is where they're getting evaluated to be hot shots. And there is a scene in here that is interesting, but I do need to talk about the helicopter scene. So they're flying above the fire and you see the helicopter rocking, right? And it told me that there was, there is, most people don't understand it, but there are weather patterns that can be made just by the fire itself that creates that buffering and that rocking and updrafts, right? And you actually see that in the movie. So that's pretty accurate, what they're experiencing as they fly over the fire, right?
Correct. I spent my first 4 years on a hand crew, but we were also a helicopter fly crew. So we would be dropped off at fires and then supported by the aircraft. But they did a pretty good job of capturing the flavor of flying in a helicopter on a wildland fire.
Yeah. The other thing that I thought, and this was more the movie making part of this, John, and this was the fires themselves. So I'm sure they used digital creations, but they they did actually use some real footage from fires, for controlled fires and whatnot, but they also digitally enhanced them. I thought, from a movie making perspective, I thought the fires were pretty cool. Even though, you can't go, let's go burn up 1,000 acres so that we can make this movie. That's not going to happen. So they got to find a way to make this happen for movie making. I thought it seemed pretty real to me. The footage seemed real.
So in Albuquerque, New Mexico, they built their own forest.
Did they really?
They built a forest with, I'm assuming, with natural gas flames. They use, I think if I remember right, they use containers to backfill up against it and put trees in. And they actually built I don't know how big, it wasn't giant, but they built their own forest where they could do their own shoots with their own controlled fires.
Were they putting actors in there, or was it just to catch the fire shots that they would then blend the actors in later? If you know that, Joe, I
don't know how they actually did it, but it was pretty impressive what they built for a little forest to burn. So.
Well, I thought those shots were very realistic. John, what do you think in terms of
it looked real. But this is the first time I heard about them building their own forest. That's amazing. What they can do.
Well, I certainly enjoyed it. And here's the other thing: coming together as a crew, talking. Now, here's one of the scenes, and I actually, this is I guess a leadership lesson when I saw it here. So they got this old curmudgeon who's evaluating them to be a hotshot, right? And Josh Brolin here, he's laying out, here's our plan, guys. This is what we're going to do. This is what I expect the fire to do. And he's an old hand himself, right? That's what comes across in the movie. And the curmudgeon that's evaluating him starts giving him direction. No, that's wrong. That's not what's going to happen. And it's Josh Brolin faces this challenge. He wants to be a hotshot crew. I mean, I don't know if any of this part of this is true or not, but it certainly was. I think it was. This is how a leader's supposed to be. Now he has his own experience. He's in charge, and he says, "No, that's not what's going to happen. You're here to evaluate. I'm in charge. I'm calling the shots." And you know, I can only think of John. I can only think of barricaded suspect situations. You know, you're the sergeant out there. You know all the information. Then somebody with a star shows up, and suddenly they want to take over. And our policy is, hey, unless you officially say that you're going to take over,
shut the fuck up and stay out of my way.
That's exactly right. And I had to do that once. Somebody was giving me, I had a barricade, and they were giving me well, we need to do this. And the SWAT guy was working with the commander, and I felt I said, you know what, I want to give this guy a chance to come out. I want to call him out. I think we got time. And the SWAT guy was confirmed with the commander, and the commander talked, and I finally looked at her and says, "Are you taking over?" And that was no. I said, I think we're going to call him out. Just get your guy. And sure enough, the guy came out about 30 minutes later. So I was right. And, but that's what when I saw this was real leadership. No. And he said, did you come away with that? That's what I came away with. That I thought it was a really good scene.
I agree.
And I thought it was one of those leadership scenes that most people don't, because I really want this. And if I just go along, I might become a hot shot, but in his mind, that wasn't right. And he pushed back, even though
he's smart. That's real leadership. You know, what's funny is, remember when they were not certified yet, and the California crew says, just clean our shit up when we're done.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, he had already told them where the line was going to be and where that fire was going, and they didn't believe him. And sure enough, the next scene, they're showing the back of Prescott up near Granite Mountain, and I know exactly where it was on fire. He goes, I told them, and everybody's evacuating. So he knew how that fire was working. He knew the area, he knew the winds, he knew all that stuff. Even with his table that he looked at with his precipitation and all that, atmospheric conditions, he knew just from brains and educating himself. And then when this guy comes up and says, 40 years, you were shitting yellow when I was doing this. He goes, I don't give a shit. You're here to observe, and I'm in charge. And he was right. And he handled it right.
Yeah. And I like those little leadership lessons, because sometimes it's easier to bow and just go along. And, he's got the jewel right there in his grasp. And he's thinking, if I do what I'm going to do, I might lose that. Right. So, hey, Joe, in terms of leadership, I don't know if this happened was true or not, but sometimes, I thought that was a pretty good scene that displayed leadership. No, I'm in charge. I know what's going to happen. This is what my crew's capable of. This is what we're going to do. And I see it differently than you. That happens sometimes, right? With people who are planning on how to, whether it's a hand crew or you're at the command post, right? And ultimately somebody's got to make a decision. Now they also need to take the hit when they're wrong, but ultimately somebody's got to make that decision. And I saw leadership in Josh Brolin. And what did you say? Do you agree with that?
I think you hit the nail on the head earlier when you were talking about barricaded suspects. In my fire world, if I was the incident commander on a structure fire and my battalion chief came in and said, hey, I think you ought to do this, I think you ought to do that, and I didn't agree with him or her, I would absolutely say same thing. Is this yours or is it mine? And we would discuss it. It wasn't we weren't butting heads. Right. It was I know this building, I know the people, I know what we have, and you just showed up. But I mean, with rank comes great responsibility. Yep. So was it accurate? Maybe.
Yeah.
I could see it happening. Absolutely. I absolutely could see that discussion being had on a fire line. So I'll leave it at that.
Well, let's roll with the next scene. You're a hot shot now. They've worked very hard. They got evaluated. Josh Brolin against his, shoots back on the evaluator, but the evaluator, being the curmudgeon that he is, says, yeah, the leader's kind of strong-headed, kind of a bullheaded, but these guys are hardworking guys, and they become hot shots. And of course, they make them get in their protective patches or what do they call those, Joe? Protective
Fire shelters.
Fire shelter. There we go. And I have to bring out this quote that that Jeff Bridges says. If you're looking for sympathy, that's somewhere between shit and syphilis. And which is probably typical of somebody who's talking to a hotshot crew, but nowadays you kind of get in trouble for that. But I did like, just some of the down-to-earth stuff that you saw here. And they get them in this position, and I don't know if any of this is true, and this is when they announced them that they're actually hotshots. But I like that scene. That's why I picked this scene out, because we've lost the ability to kind of laugh at ourselves and be self-depreciating, and now we got to be politically correct all the time on stuff. But I wouldn't be surprised if something like this was said. I don't know if it was said, but this stuff does happen on hand crews, Joe. I mean, they tend to be a little rougher, right? At least 10, 20 years ago. It might be a little different now.
Yeah. You develop a bond with your crew, and usually you can speak freely.
Yep. John, what do you think of the quote from, I don't know who the writer was, but I thought that was a pretty good line.
Yeah, it was a good line. I loved it. Well,
It's
any of these small, tight-knit groups, a lot of camaraderie. You're going to talk shit, but when it comes down to it, you listen. They know who to listen, who to follow. Right. One of the other interesting thing is these are all young men, right? So, and of course they're talking about girls all the time, and which is typical. I mean, when I was, I started on 21 and I was working the streets at 20. Oh, I got to tell this story, Joe. So Tony Maroney, you know who he is, right?
I do. Fire chief of the Los Angeles County Fire Department.
So he's working Station 8. I won't say it was him, but I get a call for service. Station 8, prostitutes hanging out in front of the fire station, and they wanted them cleared out. I go there, and of course there's prostitutes, and they were dressed as girls, but they were really guys, and the fire guys were just having a hard time because they're standing in front of the fireplace, and they're on top of the firehouse throwing water balloons at the prostitutes. So the prostitutes are all mad. They want them clean out, and the firefighters are all mad, and they want them clean out. And I don't know if Tony was one of them, but he was definitely working the station at the time. And I think it was his first assignment, Tony Maroney. I'll never forget the name. I always liked him. But yeah, cleaning out the prostitutes in front of Fire Station 8 in the city of West Hollywood. Did you ever work Fire Station 8, Joe?
Just on overtimes.
Just on overtime, yeah. So it was that was the first time I met Tony Maroney. I'm really happy to see him doing well as the fire chief of LA County. And I have to tell you, I don't want to disparage anybody, but I have to say, when Tony got on stage, I really felt comfortable that he knew what the hell he was doing, knew what the hell he was talking about. Whether they got it all right or not, he presented well. And I think what most people need to realize, when you have a leader, whether you're in front of a community or you're on TV, your job is to allay the fears, build confidence. We're going to get through this, and I felt Tony did a pretty good job of hitting the right, good giving information out, and just hitting the right tone. And so anyways, that's my thoughts on some. I don't know if you want to comment, but there is importance as a leader. You gotta reach out to that community, instill confidence, and build that community back up. What do you think,
right.
Joe?
Well, I think that if that really happened at Station 8 and Tony Maroney, Chief Maroney, was a probationary firefighter, that I guarantee he was not involved with that.
Oh, I don't say he was. Yeah, I didn't. I said I don't know who was throwing it. I just know he was there. But I liked him. He was such an affable guy as a young firefighter, and I only got a chance to talk to him a few times. Remember, I was brand new too, so
yeah, he was very supportive of our family, and he's still supportive of our organization. So great guy.
I am not surprised. He is a good man. Let's roll another fire, and we're going to talk a little bit about hopefully how these fires work, and because we saw some of it here in LA. Now these guys are now they're hot shots, right? So they're deployed, and I guess they could do hand crew work, but they can also it just expands their area of responsibility when they go to these fires, right? Because I guess when you're at a fire, if you're a resource that's available, any job is if they need you for any job, you're available for any job. All right, we got to talk about this one. So they go to their post, and the airplane gets it wrong and drops water on them. That doesn't happen very often, Joe, but that does happen. There's miscommunication. Sometimes these things do happen. I don't know if this happened in real life, but they got a water drop right on top of their heads. Sometimes you want that, right, if you're in a bad spot, but talk about a water drop and the force of a water drop, either whether on a crew or just on the grounds.
So a water drop, there's so many parameters. It depends on the winds, depends on how high and fast the aircraft is flying, depends on, if they're going slow and low and dropping everything. They can drop partial loads. There's so many variables on what kind of water you get dropped on you, or phos check or whatever. If it's 110 degrees, a mild rain feels pretty good, but you have to also remember that if you get wet, especially like right now, these fires in January, if you get wet, you're going to be wet all day, and you're going to be miserable. Everything's going to dig into your skin. If your feet get wet, you start getting, everything gets raw. But there are times when you just can hardly beg for a water drop. As you get into, if you get into a tight spot, or if it's hot and you want a light rain. We've had firefighters killed by drops. Matthew Burchett from Draper Fire Department in the Salt Lake City area was killed at the Montecito fire on I think it was a VLAT, which stands for Very Large Air Tanker. Made a drop and hit a tree, and the tree killed Chief Burchett. Water drops are no joke, and phos check drops are no joke. Your goal is not to get dropped on, but like you said, when you're in the moment in the game, things happen. So
I remember that in top of West Hollywood, in Beverly Hills area, we had a big fire. A big music producer, a guy had been around for 60 years. His son fell asleep, and sure enough, the house went up. And the firemen are on the roof, and they're digging a hole through the ceiling. They're putting their hoses in. Here comes a fucking helicopter, and it dropped a shitload of water, knocked two of them off the roof. And then firemen were screaming. They were so pissed.
Yeah,
that was just some nasty shit right there.
Right. Our Firehawk helicopters carry 1,000 gallons of water, and are at about 8-point-something pounds per gallon. And our little helicopters, our 412s, carry 360 gallons of water.
Oof.
Wow.
Yeah, thanks.
So are the Firehawks the ones with the big hose that drops down and they suck it up?
They can self load. The 412s are loaded at a helispot.
Okay, so helispot, so they land there, they have water real close, the water fills them up, and then they take off. Blackhawk, or the Firehawk, and I remember when you guys were purchasing those things, what the costs were. That they can go to a pool or any other water source and suck up the water and drop it. And of course, the closer the pool of water, the closer the reservoir, that's a big issue here in LA these days, the quicker you can get back on fire with the water, right?
Yeah, turnarounds, correct.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about the big aircraft, because this is what these guys got hit by. They got hit by a big aircraft. So we got super scoopers, and somebody was asking me about them recently, because I think because I was in public safety, I know everything about this stuff, and I said, well, I think they just skim the water, right? They Very
Correct.
skilled pilots, though. They skim the ocean water or large lake, and they scoop up water, and then they come and drop that water. Do you know the capacity of those guys?
You know what? I don't. I know that they're on contract from Canada, and then they'll spend half a year in our area, and I think the other half a year they spend like in Australia.
Yeah.
But I don't. I'm not up on the actual specifics of them. I don't know the specifications.
Yeah, somebody did ask, well, why don't we have our own super scoopers? And I have to explain because we only need them half the year. So you buy something that's going to sit on the ground. So they actually contract for the service, I think, is what you're
Correct.
talking about.
Right.
And so that they're available locally. And I imagine it's probably a collective contract with the county, city, and other entities that do that, maybe even the state.
Way out of my pay grade.
Way out of your pay grade. All right. Well, hey, we are trying. And okay, let's talk about backfires. So, so sometimes you light a backfire to burn fuel off to stop the pace of a fire. You want to explain a little bit more in detail, Joe, what that means?
Yeah, there's differences in a backfire or a firing operation, but basically you're just taking the fuel away from the head of the fire or away from the fire. So let's say it's burning wherever, and there's a little bowl that it's eventually going to get to, it's going to get there, and the conditions are correct. You can actually like burn that little bowl out. When the fire gets to it, there's no fuel to burn, and it goes out. I made one of the most complicated parts of firefighting so simple right there, but basically you're fighting fire with fire, taking fuel away from the fire that's in front of the fire head. So.
And so after they do this backfire, they find a rocky outcropping to go sit on because it's safer where there's rock, right, versus where there's brush. And I think
safety zone, correct.
Yeah. So and that's probably a little more cinematic effect here, where you can get all the team watching the back burning, the results of their work. I imagine they would just keep pumping out of the area instead of sitting and watching it. But we gotta make movies, right? So we gotta do the right thing. So embers.
No, I think they actually sat up there and had lunch.
Did they really?
In real life?
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
They got to take breaks too.
Got to take breaks. Yeah, you got to get your fuel right. So you're eliminating fuel for the fire, but stocking up on some fuel for yourself, I guess. Right. Okay, embers. This is the next one. Okay, this is I remember when Wolseley came through my neighborhood. I live in Calabasas.
Wow.
And I remember talking to God, I forget who it was. He was pretty high up, and it might have been Osby, and he talked about how the embers were just floating so far because of the wind that you couldn't stay on top of the spot fires, and that happened this last week, as the force of the wind blew the embers so far that you couldn't really gain containment. So let's talk about embers and wind, Joe. How does that make it difficult for you to contain a fire and control a fire? In this case, the embers were kind of falling down, so they're just coming straight to the ground. But that isn't the case in every fire, and that's why it might be Santa Ana's when you have strong winds, like we're going to see in the Yarnell fire at the end of this thing. The embers push the fire quicker than you might predict, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, you have your fire head, and you have it's wind driven and maybe topography driven, and as it's got embers going in front of the fire at whatever speed, depending on the speed of the wind, it's actually starting fires in front of the fire. So and it could go, embers can go anywhere. When we're done, I'm going to send you a video of a video that was just taken at the Palisades fire, and it'll show you the embers. And it looks like bumblebees flying around.
Yeah. In this scene, you see them kind of gently floating around. That's what I talk about. Yeah. But in the Palisades and Altadena, they're like straight. They're like, as you said, they're like They're like they're flying to a destination almost.
Right. They're angry.
They're angry
fire weather.
So. Yeah. Well, John, so give us a little bit terrain in Arizona. We're talking more flat, right? And that are there?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
No. Up in Prescott and around there, you got the Dells, DELLS. all the rocks, beautiful rock formations and everything else. It's not flat terrain at all. It's very rocky. You know, you get farther out, you're going to have a lot more wider spaces, but there's a lot of rock. It's not flat at all. And if you get up even higher, up to like towards Williams and Flagstaff, you got nothing but pine trees, up and down hills, green everywhere. But down in Yarnell, it's desert and a lot of rock.
So when they say making a run, the fire's making a run, Joe. So when the wind gets head up and the embers are flowing and it's pushing the fire, not only with the embers, but just the fire itself, the pace of it picks up and the embers will create spots in front of the fire, right? That's are they talking about that? What do they mean when they say the fire's making a run? If you've heard that terminology in the movie.
Yeah, it's just when everything comes into an alignment, the wind, the uphill, the humidity, everything comes in to alignment, and that fire, rather than going 3 or 4 miles an hour, is now doing 12 to 20 miles an hour or more.
Yep.
That's basically making a run. It just increased fire behavior due to everything coming into alignment. So,
all right, I got to ask the math here. So, how quickly can a hand crew or a hot shot crew, let's say over reasonable gentle slope, how quickly can they move per mile an hour? Because we got to talk about that per mile an hour and compared to, so can they go what 3? Let's see. When I hike, I can go maybe 3 miles an hour just at a decent pace. So you're talking 4 or 5 miles an hour if you're lucky for a hand crew carrying all that gear. Am I on the number there? Am I close?
Are you talking
Let's say
about
you're a
just
hot shot
hiking?
crew. How quickly can they move from one point to another point with vast gentle slope? Are we talking 4 miles an hour? So when you start seeing a fire moving a lot faster, the math will suddenly catch up. Is that what am I doing the math right there?
Way too many variables to give you an answer on that. There's, it depends on the crew, depends on how tired they are, depends on what kind of topography, depends on what the fuel growth is that they're trying to get through. Is it rocky? Is it steep? There's no way. I mean, I can't give you an answer on that.
That's almost impossible to answer.
Right.
But that's the hazard of doing this kind of fire, right? Is the unknowns are really is probably where the danger's at. I would imagine. And let's roll the next scene because it is emblematic of I think what a lot of firefighters face, and I just call it this saving the symbolic site. And we're going to roll through this, and then I'll show some pictures. And
that's Prescott.
That's Prescott there. So they got this fire coming through Prescott. So the mayor's investment and is having his own hotshot crew is paying off, right? And they set them up on a 2,000-year-old tree that is apparently pretty important in Prescott. John, I don't know if I imagine this is accurate because they do a picture in front of this thing, right?
Yep.
And that happens, right? That happens. You have this wide area, but there's certain symbols within a community. I think I was thinking the Getty Villa here and the Palisades fire. I don't know whether it survived or not, but sometimes there's things that are really important to the community. Unfortunately, Zane Gray's house burned down in Altadena. I don't know if you know that, John.
Yeah, I heard.
Yeah, terrible. But there are times
brother's house,
where
everything.
You prioritize your resources to save that symbolic symbol of the community. And they do that. And in this case, it's running through, obviously, if they were making an evaluation, whether it's life or property, they would be switching or the symbolic site versus real property or people. They'd be switching that. But they had the ability to save this symbolic site for Prescott, and they did that. Sometimes that's a consideration, Joe, right? You look at what am I facing here? Where do I need to deploy my resources? Obviously, property and life come first, but sometimes there's other considerations, right?
Yeah, this was at the Dulce fire, the fire before the Yarnell fire. That's a alligator juniper tree that's, I guess, very significant. I have never been to the tree. My family has, but they were very, my son, I got to talk to him after they saved that tree, and he was so excited that they were able to. I guess it it must have been a big deal for them, and I understand that. So you hit the nail on the head with life, environment, property, or life, property, environment, depending on what type of incident it is. But they got it, they saved it, and it's still there. And eventually, I will make that hike and go visit it. So.
Yeah, you see later on in the movie where it becomes almost a shrine to these guys. But Johnny, so how important is this tree to Prescott? You were there for 7 years.
It's well known. I've been out there, and I'll tell you, I'm just surprised that they're, when they made their fire break in the Dulce Fire, and then they made the big square around it. I'm just surprised they were able to save it. God bless them. They did a wonderful job. Yeah, it's a beautiful tree. It's 2,000 years old.
2,000 years. So before Prescott even existed, well, I think I got a couple pictures of the guys. Well, after the scene, we'll pull up a couple pictures to show them. But here you see the fire making its run or moving through, and these guys are making a break around the tree. I imagine they probably wet the tree down, but it shows this. Here's a great picture. I mean, this is movie making. This makes it exciting, and you can I don't know, you can feel the fear. You imagine it. You can put you there, and if you're you like the movies, I like the movies. Gives you a good escape, and you get a pretty good idea of the hazard or the danger these guys might be in. And Joe, so hey, when what I noticed is they were using, even as some of the brush was catching fire, they were still cutting it down and moving it away. So
Right.
the safety equipment does allow you to deal with some spot fires safely and remove the brush before it gets to your target, right? So that this is accurate that they could do this, right?
Right. And you said you think they watered it down. They didn't have any water.
Oh, they didn't have any water. Okay.
Yeah. This was
No, there's no water with them.
purely removing fuel, and keeping and taking care of spot fires, removing the fuel that can burn by the tree, and getting in there and putting, they call it the black or the green. The black is the stuff that's burned, and the green is the stuff that hasn't. And taking the line and making a line that gets get anything that might be on fire goes into the black, and anything that's not on fire stays in the green, and taking fuel away from the fire. It's a pretty simple concept. Sometimes hard to do, but that's what they did.
So let's talk a little bit about this in relationship to, when the Wolsey fire came through and they let me back into my place, I have a local hiking trail that I do into the Malibu Creek State Park. I'm sure you're familiar with that, Joe. And
I am.
I decided, let me go in about a half mile and see what it looks like. And it was devastated. But what I noticed is that a lot of the trees there were still, burning embers on the tree. There was still,
Sure.
It's like, you know what I mean? And this is a week later, this stuff was still going. And so as we talk about the Palisades fire or the Altadena fire, and we got a new wind events going on today here in LA County. We're under threat of having my power shut off. That's what they're talking about. You can't get to every single hotspot and in these forests, because they had some of this just had to burn out, and they hope for the wind to dry down and humidity to get up. But in these big forest fires, you can have bigger trees that will continue to burn over time, right?
That's correct. For me in this whole fire, it was interesting because in LA County, every time we have a fire, any kind of wildland fire, we send the world at it. We send, seven hand crews and 7 engines and 12 whatever, and we just send the world at every fire. I didn't understand. What I didn't understand when this fire started, because my thinking was, how this fire start one night and then blow up the next day? They had with the weather they had that night, the night that the Yarnell fire started, they had 400 starts that night.
Wow.
400 lightning strike starts that they had to deal with limited resources. So It was not uncommon for them to let something smolder that wasn't a threat, and then the weather changed. But for me to think that how would we handle it in LA County if we had 400 starts at one time? That was the incredible part.
Wow.
Yeah, that's
Well,
amazing. You know, we have a search and rescue guy that's been around for God, I don't know, forever, and he was stationed in Santa Cruz and Altadena. He did a video recently at Altadena showing all the damage, but he's also talking about the trees. In several of the trees, he says they're still burning inside,
yeah,
and they're
that's what I
gutted.
mean.
And
Yeah.
sure enough, one goes boom, falls right by him. And he's talking about the hazards that are there if you're going to go out and look where your house used to be and everything else. But yeah, the hazard is amazing. But you know, the fires in the forest and the fires in the buildings, it's two totally different things. And you know, when they don't have water with them except to drink.
Yeah.
You know, out in the forest. But you know, I don't know if you saw the one stat: 185 fire engines, 100 of them were not working.
Oh yeah, that's LA City.
That's
Yeah, I
ridiculous.
know, and it's crazy to me, and the mayor's going to answer that. But I want to show the real life pics after. So we have a picture of these guys after they saved a tree. Let's throw that one up, and then we have them on a pyramid. Martine, you want to show those pictures? Here's the real crew, right? We saw a picture of the actors doing the pyramid, but here's the real crew at the Joe. Where's your son on this one? Joe is.
My son is in the middle. See the tallest middle guy?
Yeah.
Just down to the right, the little guy or the dirtiest. The tallest guy right there. Brendan McDonough is the third from the left.
Okay.
On the bottom row. Andrew Ashcraft, second from the left. I can name pretty much all of them, but my son is the little guy standing middle, second row back. You can see his belt buckle. Next to the guy hanging down, hanging over two guys. My son's the one on the left.
Okay.
And in the pyramid picture,
that's
Kevin's
what I thought.
Let's throw the pyramid picture. Where's he at on this one?
He's the top.
He's the top. All right. Wow, a big smile on him there. Yeah, that's cool.
Time of his life.
Time of his life. Yeah, and he's with his buddies, right? He's with the guys that he's made some good
The interesting part, those guys are all gone.
Yep, they are.
They're all gone. I mean, kind of, but they're all gone. Brendan's on the right in that picture. It's kind of blurry, but.
All right, let's roll with the last scene, and then we'll we got two more scenes. Let's roll the Garnell fire, and this is the event that took this team, and it's so we talked about trigger points, we talked about fires having a run, and these guys were given an assignment to I think make a break if I remember correctly, and one of them. The survivor, I'm sorry, Joe, what's his name again? McDonough is
Brendan. Brendan McDonough.
Yeah. He was told to go watch the fire, right? So he was away from the team, and the fire caught up with him. And I don't know if this is exactly correct as to what happened. The fire got to him first. He saw it coming. He warned these guys. And our Josh Brolin here, our team leader, he's listening to this. And what I see is the communication. The communication was there. And they see the fire moving quickly, and Brendan says, "Hey, this fire is moving pretty fast," and he gets out of Dodge. Unfortunately, a hotshot leader from another crew comes and picks him up, and they move their cars out of the way because that's one of the considerations. You get your vehicles out of there, you do that. And our leader here realizes, okay, we're in a bad spot. But what you notice in the movie is they can see the fire, but they got to drop down into a gully to make it to their safety zone. And as well, they're down there and they can't see the fire. That the fire picks up pace, and as you said when we talked before the show, they ran out of time. They got trapped in this little gully, and this is actually fairly accurate, right, Joe?
You know what? I again, have not studied this, but it appears to be fairly accurate.
But when you say they ran out of time, it's the fire picked up speed. They're humping out of there. They're doing the right thing. They saw the trigger points. They're doing everything. But sometimes a fire can be pretty unpredictable, and both in its pace and its ferocity, and their line got overrun, and they do exactly what you see them do in the movie several times. They get into their safety shelters, and they are overcome, right? So And that's kind of what happens. This thing rolls for a while. Here they are. They're moving their cars out of the way. You see the run. Again, the cinematography is fantastic. How they do this. And you can see him here. He's talking. He's talking. Okay, we got it. We got it. And and as in anything, he's pretty calm, right? And I can imagine. I don't know about the radio over traffic, but you see people that, hey, this is business. We're just doing this, and he's calm about it. And he's actually telling Brendan, calm down, just go ahead and get out of there, and and we're going to be moving. We're going to head to our safety zone. And I'm sure it's like, hey, we'll see you there, kind of thing, right? And sometimes that's what leaders have to do. They just need to let's bring the temperature down. Let's get humping. Let's do what we got to do. And they're trying to make it out of there. John, you saw that. Good movie making, good acting. I think Josh Brolin really plays a good leader, and I think he represents the leader of this team well, and he represents the team well. And what I also saw this as they make their stand, as they realize they're becoming overcome. They don't panic. They fight all the way to the end on this. Now it's about their lives, but it's they're doing what they're trained to do, and you can see them here. They're talking about, okay, I think we need to get out of here, right? So what do you think of this last scene, the fire itself, John?
Yeah, it's heart-tugging.
Tragic.
It's heart-tugging. They only had a small area to go, supposedly, to get to those buildings that were fireproof. That was their safe zone, but they couldn't make it. They were overtaken with that wind, and that fire was just too fast. And it just, it's tough to watch.
Yeah, it's. I think they were a half mile away, is what I heard, and it's this old 60-year-old meandering pace. That's a 10-minute walk for me, but over terrain, who knows? But what I didn't see is any panic in here. At least this is what is portrayed by the actors. And we should move on, right? Yeah, that's what he says. We're humping, and so they're executing their plan. But like I said, fires are unpredictable, and that's why they're dangerous, and that's why we put so many resources on them. So
I can tell you about a little story about what kind of crew they were, what kind of team they were. After the fire blew through, and they found the crew. They found all of the rookies were in the center, and all of the veterans were on the perimeter. Where they passed, they were taking care of their rookies.
You're gonna make me cry here, Joe.
God bless.
Our eyes sweat. We don't say cry anymore. My eyes sweat, so it's okay.
Yeah, that surprised me. So, oh God, one of the things that I want to talk about, we're going to get into in this last scene, is survivor's guilt, and so let's work through this scene here. We'll see as they get cut off, and I didn't know that, Joe. We'll see as the veterans take the outside positioning of these spots, and let the rookies take the inside. That doesn't surprise me at all. God. I could tell you when you're training a new person, and at least on the sheriff's department, and you get in dicey situations. I'll tell you the first time I was a young sergeant, actually, and I was put in charge of, or I was rolling to a deputy down, and a chaplain ride-along was murdered for us, and we got the guy that night. I mean, we had a deputy down, had half his face shot off, and the chaplain who was riding with him was murdered. And I still feel those feelings today. And these guys were all brand new to me, because I was when I say new, the first week, and we get this deputy down and chaplain killed. So I didn't even know these guys. And I felt this paternalistic instinct over all of these guys, and that stays with me today. So when you say that to me, that's what that brings up. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something you'll carry the rest of your life.
Yeah, people don't realize you own it, you carry it, it's part of you for the rest of your life. A few weeks later, somebody came in the station lobby my first night as watch commander and shot one of our deputies. We had a gunfight in the lobby, and that was
Nick
the station
Carson,
for a
yeah.
long time. Yeah, and I was the incident commander for the Chatsworth train crash as well, and stepping over all those bodies. That stays with you. So those things, yeah, it's you're supposed to be the hero, the Superman, and you can't save somebody's life sometimes. And here you're talking about the veterans. We'll take the hit first, get the probies or the rookies on the inside, and they couldn't do it either. So I mean, that's sometimes that you can't the hero. Sometimes the that you can't be the hero, right? So here we got the fire; it's overtaken them, and what they portrayed in the movie is they're fighting on both sides in this fire, the one in front and behind. And did you ever see the movie We Were Soldiers?
Yeah.
And
I did not.
it was they were in the the Durang Valley, and Colonel Moore, I forget what his rank was at the time, and he's leading the very first Al Cavalry thing, and they're surrounded and are about to get overrun. And when I saw this movie, I'm into the movies, right? And he's looking around, and he's fighting off with himself, and he's got his master sergeant who's got his 45 out fighting too, and he yells this code, broken arrow, and what broken arrow was meant, bring everything you got in the sky to help us because we're about to get overrun. And when I see Josh Brolin making this decision here, he's looking around, he says, all right, everybody in their shelters, and everybody looks at him, and they know what that means. We're about to be overrun. Suck it up, get in your shelters, let's move forward, right? And that's what it reminded me of. And there's times when here he is, you can see him, he's looking at it. We got frames in front, and he knows it's coming, and he makes that very tough decision that I know he never thought he'd ever be in, but he's in it. He's in it, and so I do like the way they portray this because they're trying to build the perimeter around him before they go in their shelters, but ultimately he's got to make that decision, and he's trying to get the drop, maybe get a drop on him, but it doesn't happen. So, and you see Brennan here listening on the radio as this happens, and he's helpless, and you can see that in him, and that's real challenging too. There he is. Let's see. Air attack, no air attack. And it's hard to, imagine it's hard to find the right spot to drop that water in a fire like this, right?
Yeah, it was smoky. I couldn't see.
Yep. So if you guys haven't, if our audience hasn't seen this movie, I recommend you watch it. It is an excellent portrayal of fighting a wildland fire, and it's tragic. As you look at the bottom of the screen, I want you to remember to go to Kevin Wojciak's Explorers for Life and make a donation for that program and for the victims of the recent fires here in Los Angeles. We're burning out around us, so that's a strategy too, trying to burn the fuel around you, give it a little more space to increase survivability. Get the shelters, right? Here we go. Yeah, that's an ominous scene right there, right? Deploy. Here he goes. And I just like they display the courage of the team right up at the end because they were spaced out like they should be, Joe, as you explained. They had faith in their process, and rookies on the inside. There you go. He's just like you said. And of course, he's telling his number two, you too. Yeah, that would. Sometimes I thought I'd want to be a fireman. Then you see that, maybe being a cop is okay, So
Yeah, you can have that fire stuff. I'd rather be shot at and have been.
these are interesting shots. They know they got their shelters on, and they're got their face in the dirt, and now it's just a lot of Hail Marys. See the fire going over. Now, one of the things you can see the fire going over. Here's they're going over their shelters. Is I got to do the cinema part of this. Is when the fire passes over and they go to see if they're survivors. They got the lone helicopter right going in there, and it's building up the ominous dread, right? Just the way the helicopter's rolling in. They slow down the helicopter a little bit. They slow down you can hear the rotor, right? The rotor's kind of. It's more of it seems like it's slowed down to me to get that cinematic effect.
Exactly.
And just add to the dread that they're about to face. And we're going to get a little bit into Survivor Skill. We're going to go a little bit over, maybe 5 minutes over the show here, because I got one more scene of the show. Yeah, let's roll with the next scene, Martine, and this one is survivor's guilt. And I want to talk a little bit about this because I actually saw an article, and I saw a very grim face, LA City Fire. I think he was higher than battalion chief, and he was going to talk to the community. And his comments were, I want to apologize, and this is what happens with survivor's guilt. You feel like I wasn't there. I couldn't save it. I couldn't do this. I couldn't do that. And you live with that forever. And you can see it here with Brandon. And he's got to go into this. I know this was cinematic. They found out about the fire. I don't believe they were all in the gym, but I think he's got to now face all of these families. And he's the lone survivor. And of course, they're questioning, who's the survivor? Did my son survive? Did my husband survive? And I think they do this in terms of the scene. They do a pretty good job cinematically. But he carries the memory of all these guys for the rest of his life. He lives with the guilt. There's a certain amount of shame. I survived. They didn't, right? And I think they pulled this off really well. I like that Josh Brolin's wife came out and supported Brendan. And I imagine that's in real life. A lot of that has gone on. But let's talk a little bit about survivor's guilt, Joe. This happens to police and firefighters all the time, whether it's somebody they lose close to them or just somebody's life they can't save. This is stuff they live with for the rest of their lives, right?
Yeah. First off, I think Brendan's done a great job representing his fallen brothers since that day. Since he got sober, I think he has done a great job. As a first responder, we see terrible things for depending on how many years you work. I got to be a firefighter paramedic for 22 years, and I think that we need to keep an eye on each other, keep an eye on the other firefighter paramedics, other coppers, other first responders, and make sure that they're good. The mental health side of it is changing immensely since I started in the fire service. It was suck it up, buttercup. Don't show weakness. If you show weakness, you are a target amongst your own peers. And I think we've come to a point now, where it's okay to, have a bad day. It's okay to, have a call that definitely bothers you, that you need to talk to somebody about, whether it's one of your peers or whether it's professionally.
You're absolutely right.
We've come a long ways. A lot of us that have gone on thousands of calls are carrying some baggage, and we need to unload that baggage sometimes. So getting professional help is not out of the question anymore, and it's becoming more it's becoming acceptable where it was not acceptable in the early days of my career. That's for sure.
I agree.
I started in '83, John a little bit sooner than me, and yeah, I can say that's absolutely true. John, survivor's guilt. It's real, it happens, and it's something that we got to deal with, right?
Yep.
All right, gentlemen, we are at the end of our show. I'd like you to stick around for a quick debrief. Well, wait a minute. I got to show, let this clip finish out, but because they go back to the tree and they're hanging items off the tree, but I got to show one more. I got to actually show two more pictures at the end of this scene. And, one is you, Joe, when you were a younger man with your son, and we all get older, right? And
that's the goal.
That's it, and the other one is a scene of the guys with flags draped off. I believe at the scene they put flags on top of the shelters to mark where each one of those firefighters fell individually, and it's pretty poignant, the picture itself. And, I'm kind of glad I did this film. I appreciate, Joe, you coming on to explain it. It certainly added to my comments regarding this stuff. Let's show the picture of Joe and his son, Kevin. There you are. Look at that, Joe.
Hey, look at that.
You were a handsome guy back then, right? So,
what happened? Age. That's all right.
And we got, God, he'll always be young, right? Kevin will always be young, right? And
that's right before he left for South Dakota.
Is it really?
First call we ever went together on, purely by chance.
Purely by chance. Wow.
Wonderful.
Smile. Yeah, and let's show where the firefighters fell. There's a picture of them with their. There we go. Well, no, this is not where they fell, but this is where they collected the bodies, put flags on them.
Right.
There's something to be said about ceremonies and honors that we do for fallen police and firefighters that sometimes is not understood by the public, but it is part of the recovery process. Honoring them by putting flags on them. Bagpipes is one of the things I like. It's just, we have a lot of ceremonies that help us heal as we honor the men and women of law enforcement and fire services who pass away. So, hey, Joe, thank you for joining me. Stick around for a quick debrief. John, I know you're doing the potty dance, same thing. And our Martine, I think we're done with the movie review. You can take it away.
Y'all come back now, you hear?
Thank you.